In the heart of Myanmar, near Mandalay, the sun had risen as usual, and people began their day with hope. Little children laughed joyfully while having breakfast, mothers set off to work, and the elderly prayed in the temple courtyards. But that morning, no one knew that in just a few seconds, their lives would change forever. At 9:30 a.m., the ground began to tremble like a beast. First, there was a light shake, then a sudden, powerful jolt that caused buildings to collapse and roads to split apart. Smoke rose from the cracks in the ground, and screams filled the air. Hundreds of years-old pagodas crumbled in an instant, and tons of debris fell onto the people shopping in the market. A small child, holding his mother's hand, vanished in the chaos, while another family helplessly watched their home turn into rubble, tears streaming down their faces. Within minutes, the city was engulfed in a terrifying silence. The survivors, trapped beneath clouds of dust, cried out for help. But there was no answer. Power lines were down, water pipes had burst, and communication had completely broken down. Some areas of Myanmar were leveled, and thousands of people were left homeless. Even the sky turned gray, as if mourning the devastation. Amidst this disaster, the world began to take action to help Myanmar. However, no one knew how U.S. President Donald Trump would respond to this tragedy. News of the devastating earthquake in Myanmar quickly spread across the world's media. Every news channel was broadcasting images of people trapped under debris, the agony of those who had lost loved ones, and the hopelessness of the situation. People were desperately waiting for a helping hand to reach them. The first reports reaching the White House showed that the situation in Myanmar was far worse than expected. People were starving and thirsty, hospitals had collapsed, and roads had become impassable. Rescue teams were insufficient, and thousands were still trapped under rubble. Donald Trump, upon seeing this grim picture, fell into a deep silence. In his office, he stared at the television, trying to grasp the full extent of the destruction. He had faced many crises before, but this was different. Here, people were in immediate need of help. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he turned to his advisors and spoke with determination. The people of Myanmar are not alone. The United States will do everything it can. We must act immediately. Within minutes, an emergency meeting was convened at the White House. Trump met with Pentagon officials, the Secretary of State, and FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, representatives. The first priority was to send humanitarian aid teams to Myanmar. Massive military cargo planes from the Air Force were loaded with tons of food, clean water, medical supplies, and emergency shelter. Additionally, search and rescue teams and specially trained dogs were deployed to find people trapped under the rubble. However, Trump knew that sending supplies alone wouldn't be enough. He had to make direct contact with the Myanmar government to show the people there that they were not alone. So, he personally made a phone call to the president of Myanmar. "I assure you, you are not alone. The United States stands with the people of Myanmar. We will continue to support you today and tomorrow. We will do whatever it takes." These words not only reached the officials in Myanmar, but also touched the hearts of the people. President Trump also reached out to famous businessmen and philanthropists. He spoke with figures like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and Warren Buffett to organize major donations. Technology companies deployed AI-powered systems to detect people trapped under the rubble. Many countries joined this relief effort, initiating a wave of international solidarity. In a live broadcast from the White House, Trump addressed the public with the following words, which resonated across the world. "Kindness knows no borders. This tragedy in Myanmar concerns us all. Now is the time to unite, to act together. Human life is more important than anything else, and we will do our best. Under Trump's leadership, the U.S. not only sent aid, but also developed a long-term plan for Myanmar's future. Engineers and NGOs from the U.S. were sent to help with reconstruction efforts. In one of the most affected cities, Bago, an orphanage named after Trump, was opened. This orphanage would provide a warm home and a future for the children who had lost their families. The world was talking about the generous support the U.S. had shown Myanmar, but the most important thing was how this disaster brought people together. The people of Myanmar had been struggling with poverty and hardship for years. However, this earthquake had not only destroyed their homes, but also shattered their hopes. A father, sifting through the debris of his collapsed house, was crying over the belongings of his lost family. A mother, clutching her injured child in a blanket, waited desperately for a doctor to arrive. The cries for help had been rising into the sky for days, but time was quickly running out for those waiting to be rescued. At that critical moment, the relief effort initiated by Trump became a beacon of hope for the people of Myanmar. Rescue teams were working tirelessly 24/7 to reach the last signs of life beneath the rubble. The specially trained rescue dogs from the U.S. detected the presence of a living being in the silence, and everyone held their breath. And then, miracles began to happen. On the morning of the second day, 8-year-old Aung was pulled out of the rubble alive. As the rescuer held the child in his arms, a faint smile appeared on the dust-covered face of the boy, filling everyone's eyes with tears. This moment was broadcast live on television, and the whole world was reminded of the power of humanity. But the aid didn't stop at the rescue operations. The health teams sent by the U.S. were working around the clock in the field hospitals set up in Myanmar. An American doctor was holding the hand of a 6-year-old child, trying to soothe the child's fears. Another nurse was wrapping a newborn in blankets, saying, "This child must survive. This must turn into hope for what's to come." Volunteers were pushing their own limits to support the people of Myanmar. An American couple donated all their savings to Myanmar. A group of students from Europe raised money among themselves to send food and medicine. Engineers from Japan joined the effort to repair the collapsed bridges. The world had never been so united. On one of Myanmar's darkest days, people learned to hold on to each other. The aid from the U.S. was not just physical support, but also provided psychological hope to the people. A woman, holding a small American flag, whispered at the sight of the rubble, "You didn't forget us. You didn't leave us alone." Trump was closely following every new development. In a final situation briefing at the White House, his advisors showed him new footage from Myanmar. On the screen, a 10-year-old girl, wrapped in a blanket sent from the U.S., was drinking hot soup for the first time in her life, unable to hold back her tears. Trump took a deep breath, never taking his eyes off the screen, and said, "This is why we're here. Humanity is tested in moments like these, and we must stand by each other, even in the hardest times." Under the leadership of the U.S., this aid movement proved to the world that humanity is a force without borders. And as Myanmar rose from the rubble, the world saw once again that kindness is the greatest savior. As days went by, hope began to grow. The streets, which had once been silenced, were now filled with voices again. Children, introduced to pens and notebooks for the first time at makeshift schools, set up by American aid organizations, continued to learn even amid the rubble. Teachers, holding the children's hands, said, "You are our future," helping them forget their fears. Engineers and volunteers from the U.S. had begun to rebuild not just the collapsed buildings, but also the lost hopes. A group of American businessmen funded the construction of resilient homes for those who had lost their homes in the earthquake. The people of Myanmar had thought these foreigners would come and go in just a few days, but they stayed, fighting to rebuild the country. In a small village, a 70-year-old woman, holding the hands of an American nurse, said with tears in her eyes, "Before you came, everything felt lost. But now, I feel like my grandchildren have a future." Trump was regularly monitoring all the efforts in Myanmar. He told his team, "This is not just a relief operation. This is a movement that shows the strength of humanity." And indeed, it was. As the people of Myanmar rose from the ashes of the disaster, the global wave of kindness renewed the belief in humanity. Once again, nationalities, borders, and languages no longer mattered. Humanity had come together in the midst of a catastrophe, proving that kindness is the strongest bond of all. And perhaps, most importantly, after this disaster, world leaders had a better understanding of how unity should be in times of crisis. Myanmar's rebirth was not only the recovery of a country, but also proof of how humanity can stand by each other. Years from now, those who remember that day will never forget one thing. When hard times pass, only kindness remains. Several months had passed since the disaster in Myanmar. The rubble removal efforts were complete, and people were beginning to hold on to life once again. New buildings, funded by U.S. aid, were rising, and the field hospitals were being transformed into fully equipped health centers. Orphaned children were continuing their education, thanks to volunteer teachers. After the darkest days of the catastrophe, light was finally beginning to shine. During this time, Trump's leadership and the support he had provided had caused a worldwide ripple. The people of Myanmar viewed him as a hero. The aid efforts had not only helped Myanmar rebuild, but also restored the hope that people had lost. At the White House, a large press conference was held, attended by representatives of the people of Myanmar and U.S. aid organizations. As Trump took the stage, a deep silence settled over the room. His eyes focused on the representatives from Myanmar. Their faces were a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. Trump paused for a moment, then began his speech. "Today, we are here not only to celebrate the rise of a country, but to honor the power of humanity. Myanmar has been through hard times. A great disaster struck, and people lost their homes, families, and loved ones. But what we saw was that no disaster is greater than the strength of the human spirit." The audience listened quietly as Trump continued, more sincerely than before. "Sometimes we waste time talking about our differences, but we are here today because we are all human. Just like the buildings destroyed by the earthquake, sometimes our hopes are shattered. But humanity, when it helps one another, can rise again from the ashes. We didn't just send food, water, and medical supplies to Myanmar. We sent them a message. You are not alone. And that, perhaps, was the greatest aid we offered." Trump took a small, wrinkled piece of paper from his jacket pocket. He held it for a few seconds, then showed it to the audience. "This is a letter from a small child in Myanmar. His name is Thura. Thura lost his parents in the earthquake, but our rescue teams kept him alive. Now, he's at an orphanage, starting a new life with other children. He wrote me this: 'You helped us. But the thing I am most thankful for is that you made me feel loved. Thank you, Mr. Trump.'" As Trump folded the letter and put it back in his pocket, his eyes welled up. Many in the room had tears in their eyes as well. The representatives from Myanmar hugged each other, and the journalists quietly took notes. Trump leaned slightly closer to the podium as he finished his speech and said his final words: "Kindness is much more than a helping hand. Kindness is hope. It is the strongest thing that binds us together. Today, we did everything we could for Myanmar. But remember, when someone else needs help tomorrow, we must do the same thing. Because all around the world, there is a Thura, and we must make sure they don't feel alone. The room erupted in applause. For the people of Myanmar, this was not just a thank you speech. It was proof that their pain had been shared. After the press conference, Trump briefly turned to leave the room. But a man from Myanmar, his eyes filled with tears, walked toward him. He placed his hand on Trump's shoulder and whispered, "You didn't just heal our country. You healed our hearts. We are grateful." And in that moment, it was proven once again that aid is not just an action, it's a bond. Myanmar had healed, but most importantly, humanity had once again remembered the power of unity. If you liked this story, don't forget to share it with your friends and subscribe for more content.